So when you think about who controls the price of oil, what's the first thing that comes to mind? A single cartel, maybe? A handful of powerful countries? Well, the reality is a whole lot more complex and honestly a lot more interesting. You see, the global oil supply isn't just one big spigot controlled by a single hand. It's actually a constant shifting balance between four completely different systems. And each one has its own rhythm, its own set of rules, and its own way of reacting to the market. Understanding these four hidden forces, that's the real key to understanding the price you pay at the pump.
All right, let's dive right in. Here's our game plan. We're going to break down these four key players that really dictate the flow of global oil. We'll start with the strategic manager, then move to the fast-moving disruptor, the slow and steady anchor, and finally, the long-term gamble of the mega project. By the time we're done, you'll see exactly how their unique dance shapes the entire energy world.
First up, the player you've definitely heard of, OPEC+. But I want us to think about them as more than just a group of producers. They're really the principal manager of the oil market. You could call them the strategic backbone that defines the outer limits of what's even possible for global supply. Basically, they set the stage, and everyone else has to play on it.
Now here's where their real power comes from. It isn't just the oil they sell, it's the oil they choose not to sell. This whole concept is called spare capacity, and it's their ultimate leverage. It's this ghost in the machine, this latent potential that the market has to account for all the time. The market isn't just pricing the oil flowing today, it's pricing the barrels that are being strategically held back for tomorrow.
So how do they actually pull this off? Well, it's a really delicate balancing act. They use a quota system to keep prices from collapsing, which would wreck their economies. But they also release barrels to keep prices from spiking too high, which could destroy demand for their product in the long run. It's a game of what economists call intertemporal optimization, which is just a fancy way of saying they're always weighing the value of a barrel today versus what it might be worth tomorrow. And since it's all based on negotiations between countries that have very different needs, their decisions can feel a bit mysterious. But it always comes back to managing this one finite resource.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about our next player. This is the one that completely rewrote the rulebook over the last decade or so, U.S. shale. If OPEC Plus is the slow, calculating, strategic manager, think of shale as the fast-moving, nimble disruptor that just redefined the tempo for the entire market.
What makes shale so different is its clock speed. Traditional oil is kind of like a harvesting process. You find a giant reservoir and you drain it over decades. Shale is much more like a manufacturing process. Its wells decline incredibly fast, so just to keep production flat, you have to be constantly drilling new wells. It's a non-stop treadmill of capital spending.
And this cycle right here shows you just how unbelievably fast shale can move. When prices go up, money floods in, and new production can come online in a matter of months, not the years or even decades it takes for those big conventional projects. This incredible responsiveness acts as a major check on the whole system.
This really gets to the heart of the tension in the modern oil market. On one side, you've got the slow, policy-driven manager trying to stabilize things for the long haul. And on the other, you have the fast, capital-driven disruptor that just reacts to today's prices. It creates this kind of ceiling and floor dynamic, where shale's quick reaction can help soften the extreme price swings that OPEC Plus is trying to manage.
Now let's meet a completely different kind of player. This one's not fast, and it's not particularly strategic. It's just massive, steady, and incredibly rigid. This is the anchor of the system, the Canadian oil sands, one of the single largest hydrocarbon resources on the entire planet.
To get a handle on the oil sands, you first have to understand what they're actually pulling out of the ground: bitumen. This is not the crude oil you might be picturing. It's a super heavy, tar-like substance that has to be either dug up like coal or steamed for hours just to get it to move. This makes getting it out a huge, capital-intensive industrial process. It's kind of like a giant factory that, once you turn it on, is very, very hard to turn off.
And that giant factory faces three huge hurdles. First, just getting the product to market is a constant battle against pipeline bottlenecks. Second, only the most complex refineries in the world are even capable of processing it. And third, there's some pretty significant environmental and regulatory pressures. So what's the result of all this? Well, oil sands supply is incredibly insensitive to short-term price changes. It's a stable, vast, but totally inflexible source of oil.
Okay, our final player operates on the longest time scale of all. These are the mega projects, the billion-dollar deep-water offshore platforms that represent an absolutely massive gamble on what the price of oil is going to be many, many years from now.
This timeline is everything. Think about it.
From the moment a company greenlights one of these platforms to the moment the first barrel of oil actually flows, we could be talking 7 years, maybe even more. A decision made today, in a high-price world with optimistic forecasts, won't actually add any new supply to the market until that market looks completely different.
And that leads us to the core problem that deepwater creates for the market. It amplifies the boom and bust cycle. Projects get approved in the boom times when prices are high, but by the time they finally come online all those years later, the market has often flipped to a bust. So this new wave of supply crashes into a weak market, which just makes the downturn even worse. It's a perfect recipe for what's called cycle amplification through timing mismatch.
So let's bring it all together now. We've got the manager, the disruptor, the anchor, and the mega project. And here's the thing, none of them operates in a vacuum. The price of oil that we see every day is the result of these four forces constantly pushing and pulling against each other.
This table really puts it all on one page. It summarizes our entire journey. You can really see that push and pull in action. OPEC Plus tries to manage volatility with its strategic flexibility. Shale dampens the extremes with its super high responsiveness. The oil sands provide this rigid, non-negotiable baseline of supply. And then deepwater megaprojects amplify the long-term cycles because of their fixed, slow-moving nature. It's this incredible interplay that defines the whole market.
And that leaves us with the big question, right? As we move through the energy transition, as technology continues to change and as policy evolves, the balance between these four forces is going to shift. Will the manager's strategy win out in the end? Will the disruptor's speed keep setting the pace? Or will the sheer scale of the anchor and the megaprojects have the final say? Understanding this delicate balance, well, that's the key to figuring out where the world's most important commodity is headed next.